I'll just add to the Secretary's comments. Specifically, we had a legal team as part of our operational action team in place Friday night. As soon as the court order was received and they advised us on the implications, we put a complete hold on anyone being removed in connection with the executive order. We then process those folks for waivers and release them in the United States.
Kelly.
I'm sorry, right here.
Paula Reed, CBS News. 2 questions. The first one's just to clarify what you said, that you knew the executive order was coming. Is that what you said? You knew it was going to be signed on Friday? Because there have been some reports the first time you found out about it was when you were on your plane and you were upset about it. But you knew it was coming?
As I said, we knew it was coming from like 2 years ago when Mr. Trump first started to run for president. Certainly didn't learn about it on an airplane. I mean, again, knew it was coming, knew it was signed Friday morning. I took a trip down to Miami for a couple of different reasons, one of which was to visit the people on the front lines of this whole effort, and that is the folks at the Miami airport, TSA, Border Patrol, those kind of people. Had some time. You know, as you probably all know, I came from, before I retired, 39 months in Southern Command, went there and talked to Admiral Kurt Tidd, engaged with him about the partnership that frankly is very strong between Homeland Security and Southcom. In fact, I'm very proud to say that that developed very closely between myself when I was in command and my very, very good friend Jay Johnson, and we want to continue that. But no, I didn't learn about it on an airplane.
How much guidance were you able to give them, specifically when it comes to green card holders or people who had visas as a result of their work with the U.S. military? Because it seems like a lot of the problems that were encountered could have been easily foreseeable.
I think from our perspective, again, people like me are expected, and not just because of my military background. The departments are the implementers of the policy, obviously developed, by the White House, approved by the president, in collaboration, and then sent down to the departments for execution. In this case, Homeland Security. The EO to me, and again, it was more or less a collaborative process. The EO to me was fairly clear. Again, when that came down, I think I was in my 6th day on the job, but I relied on people like the ones that are standing up here in the hundreds back at the headquarters to say, okay, we got it, boss. We know, this looks good to us, and we're off to the races. Really, I kept being asked about chaos at the ports of entry, and as I said to many members of Congress in individual phone calls, our officers who were at the counters, so to speak, the only chaos they saw was what was taking place in other parts of the airport. They knew what they were doing as immigrants, or not immigrants, but foreign nationals presented themselves. They know what to do. They knew what to do with it. And as I say, the only, I guess, we had to step back and recock a little bit. Kevin can address that. He already has. We had to step back and recock just a little bit, based on the court order that we immediately implemented. So, no, I knew this was under development, and I think we were in pretty good shape in how it was implemented by the workforce.
Okay, we'll go here, then Evan.
Yes. Elise Foley with the Huffington Post. The White House has said repeatedly that 109 people were inconvenienced by this. The number that you gave for getting waivers, like 10 times that. Can you explain the discrepancy there between 109 and then the number of people that you just gave who were not let on planes, eventually given waivers?
Yeah, you can take it, Kevin. I think the 109 certainly was, I'm recollecting a phone call. Now, the 109, I think, was very early on, right? I mean, it was the first day of the thing that evening. And, of course, over time, that number would increase. But go ahead, Kevin, if you have anything else.
Just to follow up, though, can you explain why the White House didn't have a current number? They were saying 109 yesterday.
Yeah. As Kevin will probably outline to you, the records keeping we do is not always. It's based on yesterday. So Kevin, acting commissioner, can give you some very good numbers yesterday. But in order to get the numbers today, we have to wait till tomorrow. It's just the way they collect the information. Actually, obviously it's an ongoing period of comings and goings. So that's why they do it that way. Kevin, I don't know if you have.
The Secretary is absolutely correct. I understand the White House was referring to the initial hours and the folks that were in transit to the U.S. when the executive order came about. That was a much smaller number that were affected who had landed in the U.S. and were being addressed, and some of them were subject to that court order. So I think that's the difference in the numbers. We're going to keep updating the numbers on our website so you have the accurate current information as of a validated number from roughly about 20 hours before every time we post.
Secretary Curley, Pierre Thomas, ABC News. Did Homeland Security have a specific operational plan in place prior to the executive order being signed? And then secondarily, when did you learn specifically that President Trump was signing the order?
Well, I guess I'd go back to, I knew he was going to sign an order about a year and a half or 2 years before he became the president-elect. From day one, in terms of the inauguration, finishing touches, I'd have to put it that way, were being put on the executive order. As I say, the high-level folks in the government, attorneys as well, were part of that. People on my staff were generally involved. I guess probably Wednesday, I think we learned, Tuesday, Wednesday, that it would probably be during the week that it would be signed out. As you could imagine, copies go back and forth, and they're tweaked right up to the last minute, or adjusted right up to the last minute. I think probably Thursday we found out it was going to be signed the next day. And certainly, if you really, if you really want to know what was in the executive order, just read the newspaper the day before, and you'd find out. But so it was done in that way, and of course, Kevin and his team, the whole team, knows it's coming. Knows what certainly the president-elect and knows what direction the EO is, the draft EO was outlining. So people like Kevin, I don't know nearly as much about this as he does in terms of how you actually execute right down at the counter level at the airports, but he was leaning forward on that. So when it was signed, we executed. And the only, as Kevin I think you'd agree, the only adjustment that had to be made was when the court order came out, and of course we reacted to that as fast as we could.
Evan?
Yeah, would you explain a little bit about the impression of confusion? We heard from some of the airlines that they felt they were getting contradictory guidance, especially with regard to whether or not people, the legal permanent residents, were allowed to even board aircraft, and where they would be get this secondary screening that people started talking about. Perhaps you could explain a little bit about that level of confusion and why that developed.
Let's take it, yeah.
So under the executive order, Section 3, there's a provision for granting of waivers when it's in the national interest. So lawful permanent residents are technically covered in the executive order as immigrant visa holders. We worked quickly with counsel to devise a waiver process. The Secretary